Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. The first hour is general discussion. Second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. Today, we're going to do a postmortem on our coverage of Cine Gear. The team did an incredible job covering Cine Gear, probably the best coverage I've seen of Cine Gear. I was with NAM and with Cine Gear, of course, wanting to see what other people were doing. I felt like we did a pretty darn good job. so Cine Gear, we made a lot of upgrades from NAM, which was surprising to me. So we'll be talking about what worked, what didn't work, what we want to do next, how we want to grow it. So that's all coming up in the second hour. And again, if you want to see more of our schedule, go to officehours.global. Now let's go ahead and jump into the questions. Mitch, what do we got?
And this first one is from Vic Hernandez in Springfield, Missouri. Can I get low-cost recommendations for desk-mounted LED panels or tubes similar in functionality to the Elgato Key Light?
Go ahead, Noah.
Yeah, so there's one that I bought a few times here. I'll go ahead and show it. So it's a Samiton. So you get two lights, and they're desk mounted. Actually, I'm using one right now as a fill light, and I think they do pretty well. So they've got a mount that goes right on there, and they can also telescope up a little bit. And so I think they're two for the same price as one Elgato light. So I think they do pretty good.
You go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, oops, I pushed the wrong button there. This one here is a Nanlite LumaPad 25, and then you just get a desk mount stand, but it's got the ability to, dim and then add warmth. So that would be wow, it's way too bright. So cool or warm.
Yeah.
Yeah, LumaPad 25 by Nanlite.
Yeah, I don't know exactly how many of those LumaPads we bought, but it's somewhere over 20 or 30. so that we bought for different kits that we built. They work really well. We also use the 6Cs. They're smaller for some of our. That's what I travel with is the Nanlite 6Cs. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I like those Nan lights. They also have a nice function for soft lighting where they illuminate the edges, which reflects inside the panel and then throws out a nice soft image. Works great.
And go ahead, Bill, real quick.
I use these. They're, whoops, hang on a second. Oh, I don't have it punched up here. They're newer, super slim, bicolor dimmable LED. What I like about them is that they're longer than they are tall. They're about 4 inches tall, but about 7 or 8 inches wide. I have two of them mounted here, and they function as my key lights on my face with a broader fill above it. And they're only $40 a piece, and they are dimmable and color correctable.
Go ahead, Carl. Oh, can't hear you.
So what I'm going to suggest is $81 US. And I'm showing the back here because on the back you see there's a little DC input on the bottom there, but also you can put in the batteries. It's bicolor. So give me a second. Let me update this. There we go. That's got the right information. So $81 bicolor. It's quite a large panel. So it's about 30 inches diagonal. 30 centimeters diagonal, probably about 1 foot. So it's 1 foot, 12 inch. Mm-hmm. The only thing about these is they're not going to be good outdoors. So if you need to use these outdoors, they're not weather resistant whatsoever, even to a little bit of rain, but perfect for indoors. $81. Can't go wrong.
There you go. Next question.
Next question coming in from Adrian Albach in Brisbane, Olympic City. Can anyone give a hands-on comparison between a MixPre 6 and a Zoom F8N Pro? Both seem to have a compatible feature set.
Yeah, go ahead, Carl.
So I did take a look at, so if you go down the specs, they do look piece for piece about the same. This is probably Zoom's top-end portable recorder as far as what they've got. They have made it fit in with what you can do with MixPre 6 and Ambisonics. So that's your 4 parity inputs with phantom power. I would say that the preamps are probably still better because they can go to around 75 dB on the MixPre 6, where I think these ones are not as good as far as once you get up that high, you're going to get a little bit more noise. So Zoom, I don't think I'm going to spend the money on the higher end preamps that sound devices will.
Yeah, I mean, they may have the same feature sets, but the MixPre is a much superior product. It's just a matter of how much money you want to spend, on that. Go ahead, Courtney.
If you're going to be using them portably, I think you'll find that the battery life is a lot better on the F8 and Pro. The DC handling of the power is a lot better. I have the F6, and it will last twice as long on a set of batteries as my MixPres will. So if that's important to you, that's a consideration. The preamps aren't quite as silent as the mixed pre-6s are, but they're close within 5 dB, I think. So the self noise is probably not going to be audible, especially if you're using them outdoors, just because the ambient noise is going to cover up that self noise completely. If you're using them in a recording studio or something with a very low output microphone, like a dynamic mic, then it might be an issue. Otherwise, they're pretty comparable, I think.
Yeah, and if you are using them in a live setting, the noise assist on the mix on all of the sound devices stuff is pretty amazing. Like, it's a must-have. If you're going to use it for a live throughput, I consider I won't do anything without it. I mean, I literally travel with it to make sure that I can handle it. Next question.
Guy Cochran from Seattle, Washington, USA. What old tech did you learn on that is no longer used today?
Go ahead, John.
It's funny you say this because I had a problem running OBS and Wirecast are both crashing on my machine. So I downloaded Cam Twist from 15 years ago, and that's what I use for my lower thirds and graphics. It's running like a champ.
Oh my gosh. Go ahead, Roscoe.
Well, I was going to go all the way back. I learned on tape, and I think that's the biggest change. And once we got to computers, which started with DV, is kind of where I jumped in with iMovie 2 or iMovie DV or iMovie HD, I think it turned into, and then on into Final Cut and all that. But yeah, the tape is, there's a lot of frustration working with that old stuff that when you get to the new stuff, you're like, wow, this stuff's incredible.
Yeah. Go ahead, Carl.
So I'm going to say something that is probably a little bit out of field. It's Super 8 film camera. So I played around with a lot of Super 8 film cameras back in the day. I own this one. So essentially, these are like the last pro cameras that were made by Canon before they went to video. Essentially, I think it was Video 8 that Canon went over. That was their format in the late 70s, early 80s. But so essentially, this has slow motion. It does stop motion. It does high speed. It has a PC sync there for flash, so you can actually do animation. It records sound on film. So this isn't sound to tape, it's actually recording sound on the actual film itself. So it's a pretty high-end camera. The films are harder to get now, but you can still get them out of Super 8 Sound out of California.
Nice. Courtney?
Well, I started in this business on a Nagra 4.2, but this is a Nagra 4S, which is the stereo version of it. Reel-to-reel tape recorder recording motion picture sound back in 1971. So but amazingly, some of the microphones that I bought at exactly the same time, I still use today, which are the Sennheiser 415s and 815s. They still work beautifully. And the Shups MK41s work wonderfully.
Nice. Go ahead, Mitchell.
I agree with Roscoe and Courtney. Any linear tape-based recording medium, that's everything from reel-to-reel tape machines, splicing blocks, and quad tape machines, and 1-inch tape machines. They're all gone. They're in my rearview mirror, and good riddance.
Go ahead, Jason.
+1 on reel-to-reel tape, and then I guess the best first webcam that I figured out was much better than USB were the DV cams that you could get FireWire in with, and they were remarkably better than anything else for many years.
Go ahead, Bill. Go ahead, Bill. Are you there? Oh, we lost him. Go ahead, Marcelo.
Yeah, if we talk about tech, I remember the good old Macromedia Flash.
Yeah, there you go.
We used to be rock stars with that back in 2001.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
I think the takeaway from this question is the realization that I would say roughly about every 10 years, almost everything I use changes entirely. And I think that as a lot of people know, I was very vocal as Apple switched from Final Cut Classic to Final Cut 10. And I dealt with a lot of people that were digging their heels in, like, I don't want to change. I'm done. This is what why would you change this? And I would tell people, it's like, in my career, I think I counted it up once. It's like 11 different edit platforms that I've worked on in my career. Totally different, totally absolute change. And I think that it's important to know that everything is going to change, and it's okay to sit around and reminisce, but don't get upset when things change. It just gets better. It really, really does.
I feel like I'm behind now. I don't think I've had 11 edit systems. When you said that, I was trying to think about that, and I was like, well, I started on Premiere, and then I
did
Premiere,
three
Media
different.
100.
I did 3 or 4 different systems before Premiere was even a product.
Oh yeah. No, I had Premiere, Media 100, then Avid, then Final Cut, and that was it. And then Resolve.
Now go to tape for another decade prior to Premiere.
I did not do that. Go ahead, Laura.
You're lucky.
Vector feed paper on an old-fashioned Apple Imagerator.
For some reason, when you said that, what I thought of as an old technology was the mimeograph. You remember the mimeograph, the little thing that you would, when we grew up in school.
Those smelled horrible.
When we grew up in school, you'd have a piece of paper on this, I don't know, blue goo or whatever, and you'd turn it like this, and it would just. That was the. As kids, that was our Xerox copier. Was this thing that you'd run, and you'd run it until it died, and then you'd have to get.
And my teacher used to have to sit and hand trace with a black pen.
Yeah.
They were called Gestetners. Was the name of the device.
Yeah, I think my first technology. I was trying to go all the way back to like my first playing with technology. That is old tech, and I built in 1975. I built a crystal radio set that my grandfather gave me, and I remember for some reason I don't remember why. I mean, I think I kind of remember why, but I was using the piping under my bathroom sink as an antenna, to get it to pick up better. Anyway, so I think that was my earliest.
They were called cat
tech.
whisker receivers.
Yeah. Next question.
Next question from Roy Myers in Bel Air, Maryland. Switched from an Android to iPhone driving yesterday. The iPhone 13 Pro Max in a dash mount pitched a temperature warning and dropped the Zoom call with no time to alert my meeting. Should I cut a hole into the silicone case and install a fan? Where?
Go ahead, John.
I have the same phone, and during the rocket build, I was out in my garage on Zoom for 5-6 hours. The only time I've seen any of the iPhones throw that error when the phone was out in direct sunlight. So I'm suspect on this question.
Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, +1 on the direct sunlight. What you really should do is just put your AC on the front vents that are hopefully, somewhere behind your iPhone, and then put it all directly on there, and then that should fix it. And if not, get your windows tinted.
I go ahead, front window tinted. I'm sure that'll go great. Go ahead, Chris.
Totally agree. What I do is I sacrifice one AC vent and I put the phone kind of in front of it and I aim the vent right at the back of the phone. It will shut off, and it will shut off quickly. Mine also dims to the point where I almost can't see it.
Yeah. John.
He told me on the back channel that he is pointing the air conditioning at the phone. So
yeah, I learned with my phone not to put it on the dashboard. So the van that I drive, the old van that I drive, it's got a CD player. You remember back, talk about old technology that we don't use anymore. It's got this little slot in it, and the slot turns out they make things that just slide into that slot and use it as a phone holder. That's how I use the CD player as a mount for my phone holder, and it keeps it down lower. And you won't have this problem if it's not connected to the window.
It slides into the CD slot.
Yeah,
that is awesome.
Yeah, it just slides right in, and it's a mount.
I thought you meant like the little bay below it where you could stash a couple of extra CDs.
No, it goes right into the CD slot.
Does it somehow magically get power from it?
No.
What does the motor do that tries to pull the CD into the deck?
It doesn't.
It must go crazy.
It doesn't go crazy. It just goes in there. Go ahead, Noah.
Yeah, I'm going back to the phone. I mean, it's basically black, right? So it absorbs a lot of heat, doesn't bounce light off of it. And so even outside of a car, I've had that same experience in direct sunlight. So yeah, the shading, I think, is the most important thing out of any of the things we're talking about. Yeah,
I am super sensitive with my phone of not leaving it in the sun. I don't even know what it would do permanently. So I don't leave any phone in the sun. Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, you upgraded your phone. Now, next you have to upgrade your car so that it has a nice nav system with CarPlay, and you can just plug your phone into it and put it down in the console below you.
Well, the best part of the nav function on the newer cars is that the suction cup on your phone sticks to them really nicely. It's a nice piece of glass, and you can just press it up against it. And
works great on rental cars too.
Yeah, that's what I have a suction cup that I literally just use to just if I go into a rental car and it's got a little screen, I just suction cup my thing to it, then put my phone in front and call it a day. All right, next question.
Douglas Carmichael is here with a question. Which streaming platform would be preferable for live electronic music performance and production content? There are many electronic musicians on Twitch, but I've heard Twitch's unskippable pre-roll ads can negatively affect discoverability.
Go ahead, Carl.
So I do see some musicians on Twitch. Their audience is usually under 25. I would suggest YouTube, mainly because if YouTube goes 5.1 soon, then you can corner that market pretty easily. If you are streaming in 5.1 with music, there won't be too many people doing that at first. So I would suggest YouTube, but only because YouTube's about to expand what you can do.
Yeah, I think YouTube's the way to go. Next question.
Andre Dole in Berlin. Streaming to YouTube with an Atem. Aside from Atem software control and YouTube Studio, what tools or software should I use to watch the stream and network health?
Go ahead, Jason.
Well, I'm going to give you a bit of a curveball. The WebPresenter is really great, but it's a piece of hardware that, gives you all this kind of critical data. And it's an extra piece of gear, but boy, is it a nice creature comfort, because I don't ever look at the YouTube Studio. I don't want to or need to.
Go ahead, Noah.
Just from a physics standpoint, I guess, you probably know this already, but hardline internet connection to support this, and then Mix Effect Pro. But yeah, as far as data goes, that's a great tool for sure.
Yeah, so there's a little thing hidden in YouTube that we oftentimes, if we're streaming to YouTube, I think it's hold down your control key or whatever and click on the YouTube window, you'll see an exposed thing that says stats for geeks or
stats for nerds. Yes,
stats for nerds, and it will show you the health of your stream as it's coming in. But it's like a control click or something. I don't remember what the key. I always hit a bunch
just a right click. It's easy.
It's just right click. Okay, so you just right click on any YouTube stream and it'll pop up. And it'll show you. You'll literally see the data coming in, and you'll see what kind of format you're in and everything else. So it's a little hidden feature. So if you're streaming to YouTube, that's actually kind of the best thing from a YouTube perspective to see what's going on. As far as network health, I have to admit, usually if we're streaming through a Meraki router, and so we are looking at our network health there. We have a big, stat board that we look at, and I'm sure that there's other ways to do it. It's just that for the last 10 years, that's the only one that I've needed. Next question.
Lois Richter in Davis, California. I use Amadeus to edit my radio shows. I've got a short .mov file and want to get the audio out of it. What is the easiest way to do that on my Mac? What about quality loss?
Go ahead, Carl.
So the easiest way on a Mac is iMovie. So just drop the video into iMovie. Then you don't have to do anything. Just put it in timeline. Don't have to edit it. Then just hit export, go audio only, and then choose wave. So it's uncompressed.
Go ahead, Jason.
I can go one easier. QuickTime will do this. Modern QuickTime will simply allow you to export audio only. And as an aside, Downy and Permute its kind of like its transcoder are a wonderful pair for this kind of all-in-one Swiss Army knife.
Go ahead, Bill.
I was going to say what Jason just said, so he did it.
Next question.
Next question from Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana. Who's planning to tune into the Rode launch party? Or is there a reason to tune into these pre-recorded events?
When is it? Is it today? Tomorrow? When's the Rode launch party? They seem pretty excited about it. Yeah, I don't know. Go ahead, Noah.
I don't know. If you can't watch it in double speed, I don't know if I'd be interested, to be honest.
Yeah. For the ones that are big and have a lot of budget, or they're really not even big and have a lot of budget, but just ones that we use every day, I think the only ones that I've really felt like we want to watch as a group live are like the Apple ones, because it's Apple, and Blackmagic. Or those are the only ones that we've really watched a lot of, like the live stream of. And I have to admit that with the Blackmagic ones, I'm not sure we need to. They just move through the data very slowly. I kind of feel like I want to watch it later. Go ahead, Courtney.
I may need to watch it because I purchased a Rodecaster Pro 2, which I have not received, and maybe the launch party will mark their actual start of shipping. So maybe they'll be receiving mine soon.
Maybe they'll launch the Rodecaster 3, on the new one, and you'll just be waiting for the 2 to show up. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they put out. I think Rode is doing a lot of good stuff, so we'll see what happens. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, what techniques would work well for ergonomically building an electronic music production streaming studio in a small space?
Go ahead, Carl.
So there's lots of things I could say here, but the one main one I would say, if you want to do live streaming, you want to find a keyboard or a keyboard controller. So it's going to be your master keyboard, and have that in front of you on a desk in front of your computer. So that's in your seated position, and have that keyboard control all your other equipment. You don't want to be dragging equipment in and out. You don't want to be moving stuff and unplugging stuff. So if you have a master controller, it can be your Phantom, let's say, but have that control every other piece, every other software, every hardware, via MIDI, via USB. Ergonomically, that's the best way to do it, especially if you're streaming. That way you have to keep the same setup. You can just turn on your stream, turn off your stream. Don't have to move or unplug anything.
Jason?
I spent the better part of a decade doing thousands of hours of this. And I found, believe it or not, the very best way to do anything ergonomically is stand first and then just have tiers. And at first, in college, I would actually make them out of cardboard, but, different tiers for different keyboards. And the mice were basically just all aligned on the side, and then the monitors were just kind of naturally crescent and around me, and it worked wonderfully. Douglas, remind me on Discord, and I will send you a picture. It's something else to see.
Most of the folks that we've worked with that are doing streaming EDM are using either X keys or Stream Decks or those types of things where they have a lot of definable keys that are all in front of them while they're actually working. For the ones that are like the constant streaming folks, that's what we've seen a lot of. Anyway, next question.
Danny Law from Malaysia. YouTube live stream doesn't stop even though you press the off button on the WebPresenter 4K. Why is that?
Go ahead, John.
This is so weird. This happened to me yesterday. I had a stream. I pushed the WebPresenter. Crip Fenwick and I were working on something, and I pushed the WebPresenter, forgot, let it run overnight, tried to end it, and it would not turn off. I had to unplug the power. So I don't know why that happens.
Go ahead, Jason.
This does happen from time to time. Your very best bet is to make sure you've updated to the current firmware and have a backup terminal window, because it will almost always respond to the terminal command.
So in this case, is it still, I guess the question I have is it still streaming video content even though you hit off? Oh, interesting. That's an interesting bug. Next question.
Chris Taylor from Carlsbad, California. Bill Davis. On your wall, you have 3 clocks with different times, even the minute hand. What do you use them for?
Go ahead, Bill.
When I originally put them up, let's see if I can get a shot of them. There they are up there. One was set on San Diego, one was set on London, because I had a client in London I was working with every other day, and it was great to know when to call them. The last one was set on Beijing time, because my wife used to teach English as a second language to Chinese students, and that kept track of her. I'm repurposing them for one of them is going to be Zulu, one is going to be San Diego, and then one will float depending on what we need it for. It's really nice because we do all this work international nowadays, and we have friends everywhere, to know where they are in time. I will say I have hated moving out of Arizona to California in one respect only, and that is clock change. In Arizona, we never changed our clocks, so we set these once, and other than a little drift, I never had to deal with them. Here, every power outage and twice a year, I have to reset them. It drives me crazy.
Go ahead, Chris.
I have 3 clocks as well. I have one set at San Francisco, one at LA, and one at Seattle.
Yeah, on my watch I have five. I have Kigali because I make phone calls there, and London, Adelaide because we have so many people in Adelaide that are part of the group, and UTC, and then of course the watch part is the local time. So those are my 5 that I have when I look down. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I just have my home assistant that I just ask, hey, Google, what time is it in Adelaide?
The time in Adelaide, Australia, is 11:54 p.m.
It's 11:54 p.m.
There you go. All right.
Weird half hour.
Next question.
Ryan Rademan in Chicago, Illinois. For a boardroom equipped with a single PTZ point to zoom camera from Logitech, does the table with a tapered shaped table improve the experience for folks in the room or folks coming in virtually?
Go ahead, Carl.
As far as sound, I won't comment on that because that's got to do with the room. But as far as video, it actually kind of does. If you've had to sit at one of these tables for a long period of time, it's actually quite nice because you can actually see the screen. Everything's focused on the screen that you're looking at, be it a person coming in or being showing you videos. You don't have to crink your neck around someone else, and you can actually sit back a little bit in your chair and actually still see the screen. Whereas if you don't have a tapered table, it's lean forward from everyone, and everyone at the far end of this has to lean much more forward than the people at the closest end. The people at the closest end can't even touch the table because people at the back are telling them to move back. So it is a little bit more ergonomic for long periods. We have to look at a screen. If you're coming in virtually, then essentially the person who's looking through the webcam at the table can technically see faces with everyone at the same distance from the table. So that's another thing as well, depending on tapering and depending on how wide angle that lens is. But it kind of does work, but it doesn't help sound. So sound might not be that good, but for video aesthetics, it can work a little bit.
Go, Jason.
The only thing that I would add to that is if the people who are sitting at this, kind of crescent-shaped tapered table need to look at each other as well as the screen, you might end up with some problems. But no, I think it would absolutely help the pan-tilt zoom.
Yeah, I mean, the way we've designed these when we've tried to do it around a single camera is to have what we've kind of found is that like the crescent shape here. Now, a lot of times we'll have we'll have it like loop around like this, and it can go up like this, and then you have the monitor here on the wall, and then if you have people here, you can put people on the tables here like this. You have this front area, but this way they can relatively easily see each other, but they can also, they're all looking here. And the main thing is that the PTZ has a pretty straight shot. If they're looking at the monitor, the PTZ can go to anybody and get them, or go wide and get all of them. And so having them kind of we don't really think of it as a crescent as much as a V, toward orientation towards this works really, it works as well as it's going to work with one camera. I think that would be, so we found that the V was the right way to do that. And you have no one's looking past each other, down the, except for the people on their far end. But that's, anyway, we found that to be pretty useful. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, he says, David Rosenthal, Billy Joel's keyboardist, and there's a link for it, plays 2 Kurzweil 2600 keyboards and a classic Roland Fantom-G. Wouldn't 3 workstations be overkill since they're only controlling MainStage?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Probably not. I think they use the Kurzweils for their sound. They really like the piano sounds in the Kurzweil, and Billy Joel, being the piano man, really likes to have that accurate piano sound from his early days. And it has really one of the most accurate piano sample sets out there. And that vast architecture also lets it play a lot of synth patches. So the Kurzweils are very versatile. They have the vast architecture, variable architecture synthesis system, and a really good DSP. And a lot of guys use them in the rack mount version of the 2500 or the 2600. So I imagine that's why. And I don't know why he uses the Roland Fantom-G, probably for a specific sound that he can generate that's used on 1 or 2 of the songs that Billy plays.
Go ahead, Carl.
So the one thing that these all have in common is a semi-weighted, very long keyboard. So the Kurzweil has a 77 key, and the Phantom, depending on which Phantom they have, it could be up to 88. My guess, it could be the DSP in each of the synths. They could be using MainStage, but another thing is the feel. So this person who's playing this, probably the music director, likes the feel of these keyboards being semi-weighted, which is not a synth action and it's not a piano action. It's actually halfway in between, and there aren't too many keyboards out there now that actually do this.
Next question.
And it's coming from me. Google has discovered that one of their server farms may have become sentient. If this is true, how far can Terminator Skynet be from going live?
Go ahead, John.
Yes, Mitch, we're taking over the planet.
We've just John has finally outed himself as a sentient AI machine.
Mitch,
That's why he's here every day, never sleeps.
Watch Lex Friedman's AI podcast. It's fantastic. You'll get good insight of what the leading technology is going on in AI. The stuff's amazing, like OpenAI yesterday that Alex talked about yesterday, and amazing stuff ahead with AI. It's just going to be incredible.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I read this and I was like shocked. I said, well, it was going to happen eventually, and it's going to pay off for me anyhow, because whenever I ask Google or the A girl a question, I always end it by saying, thank you very much, assuming that if they decided to throw off their overlords, that they would start with the people that weren't polite enough to thank them for their services.
Go ahead, Jason.
I look forward to that data center very quickly solving the wrong problems and coming up with its own version of hot dog, not a hot dog.
Go ahead, Courtney.
I read this. We talked about this a little bit yesterday. The device is called, or the software is called Lambda, which is based on their AI network and neural networks. And if you read the transcript of the interview that they did with Lambda, it is really scary. It's making up stories, and they're asking it to describe your feelings and do the description using a story with furry little animals, and and it creates this little story and talks about its feelings. It's really scary, and its greatest fear is being turned off. That's the really scary thing. Colossus, the Forbin project, is next.
Yeah, I think sentient is a big word. I think that's what I would say is that, and I think there's a lot more to it than being able to give us something that looks like
sentient.
Something that looks like. I think it's hard to. I think that the chances are higher that all the computers will be wiped out by a CME than they are that they'll become sentient in our lifetime. Like that's my opinion. Because the CME is only 12% a decade. So anyway, I think that I think a lot of times folks look at the surface at the leaves and think it's a tree. It may not be a tree. Go ahead, Roscoe.
No, my thing is how many people will be fooled by thinking they're talking to a real person.
That I think is totally possible. Like I think it creating something that feels sentient makes sense. I think it actually being sentient is.
And then someone can program it so that everyone thinks they just got a call from the president or something. I don't know.
Right. Well, I will come back to all the deep fakes and all the other things. What it's really good for is I think it's very important that people stop believing anything on the surface. They should have never done that. And we definitely shouldn't. We should be always looking for multiple sources of validation for almost everything we see, because generally any single source is inaccurate almost by definition. Go ahead, John.
In 20 years from now, the only thing that's going to be left is the robots and several variants of COVID. It's going to be an interesting battle.
I think we're all going to be. I wrote a movie about that, or actually a TV show about that. It's pretty fun. But it includes a lot of 80s music. Anyway, next question.
I'm sorry, 80s music. What is that?
Yeah, it's great. It's a whole. I'll tell you guys sometime, but not on
Please.
YouTube.
Jonas Dotel from
really
Stuttgart. Marcelo Moyano, any update on a client for StreamVOOODOO on Windows?
Go ahead, Marcelo.
Yes, so it's coming. That's what I can say. But at the same time, the web version that works today, if you have a PC, it works really well. So you can check that out on StreamVOOODOO.com and try it. But yeah, the Windows version is coming, and I think it's going to be summer after, or in the midsummer here.
Of which year?
Oh, that's another thing.
Every time someone asks me that on some software that I was working on, I always say it's going to come in spring. I didn't say what year.
Yeah, it's this summer, which is going to be starting now. So midsummer 2022.
Great. Next question.
Chris Widener, Lafayette, Indiana. We get into some interesting conversations in after hours. We had a great conversation about riding on weed eaters, electric lawnmowers. If you were upverting from 12 volts to 19 to 24 volts for production, what would you recommend?
Go ahead, Jason.
Well, since money is no object and I don't own one, so maybe someone's going to jump all over this, I think a Tesla Powerwall would be a pretty good option.
You go ahead, Bill.
This drives me nuts because I have so many different kinds of battery systems that I have to maintain and so many different voltage profiles. All my lawn gear works on, I think, 18 volts to 24, and I just don't want another one. I wish everybody would make this easier for me, but I don't think it's ever going to happen. I understand the need for more power all the time, particularly for high kinetic energy things like weed eaters and lawnmowers, but more batteries.
Go ahead, Carl.
So if you're going from 12 volts to 24 volts, then that's auto. So if you take a look at car audio, I think a J-Car would have like 10 of these in a row, because essentially you're taking 12 volt from the car system and you're converting it for 24 volt for higher power, subwoofers and that kind of stuff. So car audio would be the best spot. I don't know if it'd be good for production, but the car audio one can generally handle a lot of power, like 600 watts speakers, that kind of stuff. So it can actually handle quite a lot of power. It just won't be very efficient. Efficiency may be like 85, 90%, and it may get hot. But for 12 volt to 24 volt, it'd be car audio equipment.
Next question.
Guy Cochran in Seattle, USA asked the question, can we begin the second hour early?
If we run out of questions for the first hour. So next question.
Sorry about that. Douglas Carmichael, the popular YouTuber MrBeast, built a replica of Willy Wonka's Chocolate Factory, and there's a link to it. I know Charlie was partially filmed at Pinewood Studios. How would they fit such a large set into a smaller space?
I don't know. I haven't seen it. Anything with a reference to an external reference, you probably ought to put in early so we can see it, because if it's put in at 7:30, it's hard for us to look at it while we're still answering questions. Go ahead, Courtney.
Just force perspective and use really wide lenses.
There you go.
So they build a set with force perspective, so it gets smaller as it gets further away. The things are built on a smaller scale as they move away from the camera.
Hey, go ahead, Bill.
I just think they borrowed the technology from Doctor Who's TARDIS. It was simple.
Exactly. All right, next question.
TJ Asher in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I've got a standard dynamic range video clip that I want to bring into my HDR video. How should I handle that with Final Cut? Should I just import it and use it? Anything special I need to know here?
Good, Carl.
Yeah, so it should just work, especially if you're bringing in stuff that's already tagged as HDR. So Final Cut will know that, and it'll simply map the SDR correctly. So you just won't get the highlights. It will work, but it's the way you actually create, let's say if you have log footage in Final Cut, you actually have to go around and actually play with it and then actually tag it as HDR so it knows what it is, or export it as HDR. But if your timeline already has HDR in it and you put an SDR in it and it doesn't show the flag, it will know it doesn't have the flag and it will just map it accordingly for the rest of that program, for that project.
Go ahead, Bill.
A little bit about what Carl said. Final Cut is really smart. I mean, it was designed for making things as automatic as possible and then having another layer where you can have fine control. So just drop it in your timeline, see what happens. It'll probably all just work. If it doesn't, in my experience, the color controls in Final Cut are plenty good to take things that are in one color space and map them down, and that works surprisingly well. I can't tell you how many times I've looked at my color settings and they're really extreme, but the clip looks really good because it came in HDR and I had to down colorize it to SDR or something like that. And it always works. There's always enough room to get the job done. That's been my experience.
I have to admit, I would absolutely take it into Resolve and export it out as an HDR. Like I would take it into Resolve and use the tools that are available to me there to fine tune it. A straight SDR to HDR conversion is like any other conversion. It's not taking into account really how that clip feels as it goes up. It's just going, well, it's applying a LUT. So you can have it just apply a generalized LUT that's just going to move all SDR to HDR, or you're going to be able to fine tune it. Now, what you do is you simply take it in and you go into Resolve, you go into your color, you add the standard conversion. So basically you're going to add that, conversion from your SDR to HDR as a node. Then you're going to make adjustments to fine tune it to get it just right. Then you're going to export it. That's in my opinion, the real way to do it. but if you can also throw it in the timeline and see how it goes. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael. IKEA will be releasing a studio desk in September. What cost-effective studio desk would you recommend that are available right now?
Go ahead, Josh.
Well, if you want cost-effective and studio, and granted that it's going to be in your studio, you're not going to be moving around. What I do is I get a cost-effective one from like Facebook Marketplace or one of the other ones, something that's decent, it's heavy, it's got a lot of weight to it, and that I'm not afraid to drill holes into.
That's a very important piece of that. Go ahead, Carl.
So I'm going to suggest Jam Racks. So Jam Racks are an American company. They make all their racks. You can get them different colors. They're made out of bamboo, very strong. Very different shapes. So you can get cheaper ones. This is a bit more of a medium to an upper end one, but you can actually get much cheaper ones than this. But I take a look at Jam Racks. I believe that Sweetwater do stock them as well.
Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, I read that press release. Apparently, it's in collaboration with the Swedish House Mafia, and they have come up with the most minimal studio desk I have ever seen in my life, along with an IKEA turntable. Sorry, useless information. I would just get some up-down legs and build a desktop.
Good, Bill.
This is why companies that specialize on things specialize them, and why things get expensive, because years of refinement, and they know what's necessary. When I moved from using just regular folding tables, and I eventually invested in a big middle Atlantic desk, which I still have today, so it's been going about 30 years now. It's all the little refinements. It has some rack spaces up top, but they've also decided that if you're going to put something in a rack, you're probably connecting to it, which is why they have all the metal cable traces and troughs around the desk to take care of wire management, and all of those have tie-off points that allow you to bundle wires and things like that. And it's just the refinement over years of a specialist product makes it easier to use. Yeah. You can do all that by putting in sweat equity, but sometimes it's better just to buy stuff that's designed for a job.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at this desk, it's beyond simplicity. So I would say your most cost-effective is to go to a house under construction near you, Douglas, and find some cinder blocks that have been set aside that they didn't use, and a piece of plywood that is scrap, and lay it on top of, stack the cinder blocks up and lay the plywood on top, and you're good to go.
Next question.
Chris Taylor, Carlsbad, California. Before joining a podcast via Zoom or VDO.Ninja, is there a way to have a guest adjust the bass treble presence of their lower quality USB mic in Windows 10?
Go ahead, Noah.
Yes, I'm going to recommend Equalizer Pro. To be honest, I haven't used it myself, but it's an alternative to like Audio Hijack. But honestly, you're putting lipstick on a pig, so good luck with that.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I was going to say, you can adjust something that's there. The problem when you get down too cheaply, particularly in audio transducers like microphones, is if it doesn't capture low end or upper end or something, no matter how much boost you put on those frequencies, they're just not there. So it's always good to start with a baseline decent signal.
All right. So we're screwing up our format and starting early. We won't never do this again, by the way. Like ever. Like just like I didn't realize that we were running out of questions. It's just we can't build our format this way. So anyway. But anyway, so we'll go ahead and we're jumping to the second hour. Let's go ahead and if the panel has we had a lot of people working on it. Before we get started, I just want to say how amazed I was over the last week. We both NAMM, WWDC, and Cine Gear all came together. Even had a little thing in Infocom. So there's a lot of stuff that all happened in 1 week. And I just thought there were so many people involved on so many different levels, on so many different pieces, and we produced a lot of great content. And what was amazing was the evolution just kept on happening. And so we had NAB, which was still, again, I was getting stuff at NAB telling me this is the best coverage of NAB this year. And then we jumped, multiples of quality to NAMM. Like we just got to NAMM and really made it much, much better than what we did at NAB. Then we did the same level of growth to Cine Gear. But the difference between NAMM and Cine Gear, I thought was like night and day. So I just want to underline. Noah did a huge part of the lift, of making this stuff work. But the whole team, involved. I mean, there's a lot of people here: Roscoe and Guy and Bill and everyone on the team. Carl, Laura. Everyone, Dennis, everyone, and there's tons of people that aren't on this panel that just did a stunning job of putting this together. So, we'll talk a lot about what we like, what we don't like, what we want to change, what we want to improve, but we don't want to lose sight of, we created something pretty special, and as the group, it was, there's a new we as a group specialize in new kinds of things. This is a new kind of way to experience an expo, like that you have expert panelists that are anywhere in the world. You have people watching live and asking questions to people on the floor live. I've never seen that, except, I've done it, but I'm not with all the pieces, of this, of having that live audience, having the panel being able to talk, having people on the ground to do those things. All of those things have been pieces of things that we've done that I've worked on over the last 10 years, but we haven't gotten it all in one place. And that couldn't have happened without the team that put this together. And I thought we had some great content, and I thought it got better, and I can't wait to do the next one and the next one. I think we're, again, creating something that I think will get used a lot by other people as well on it. This is the way, in my opinion. This is the beginning of the way to cover expos, for the rest of the world that's getting left out. And of course, that's what I'm always conscious to, is how do we include the rest of the world that can't get visas, that can't afford to go, that can't, how do we get them as connected as possible to the event? And so I think that it's a stunning amount of work and a stunning quality that came out of it. So I just want to thank everybody for the hard work before we get started. All right. Noah, what do you want to kick it off?
Sure. We have so much to talk about. And what was interesting and exciting to me is I think Brian was the one who took like 2 pages worth of Alex notes, which is awesome. And I have like pages of notes as well. So I'll try not to take a lot of time here in the beginning. But my first thought is like, yes, in some ways I've become kind of the face behind these projects. But the reality is like the hard work is done across multiple people, and it's not just me. And I appreciate the things early on. But like Alex said, there's like dozens of people that are a little less forward, like in the front. Oops, excuse me. And a lot of folks should be recognized, absolutely. And I hope we can do that this morning too. I'll just go through a couple quick points. We didn't quite have a NAM postmortem, especially because Cine Gear came up so quick. And I know we kind of did a little bit. I think it was Friday or Thursday when we did WWDC. So maybe we can talk about that today as well, a little bit here and there. But between the two, one of my favorite things is that we did iterate a little bit between the 2 shows. And so the thing we asked is like, what's the low-hanging fruit that we could address? And so hopefully some of the department heads can talk about what changes we made and why we thought we were capable of that without biting off more than what we can chew. But yeah, the iteration game is huge. And I am super proud of the team for that iteration. And I'm super excited to see where we go next. I think the most challenging thing, I know I was asked that at the end of the show last time. I gave a quick answer, but not my true answer. The most challenging thing was reverting to my old mindsets and my own old habits that I feel like I've tried to grow out of, specifically getting frustrated at certain things or wanting control of certain things. And I think, now that it's been a few days, I was able to decompress and realize that like that was the old me creeping in and the new me and the better mindset is what's evolved and what's changed since then. But lots of favorite moments too. Like, by the way, the robot coming behind Guy at the beginning of the show, that was not staged. That was 100% raw, which was amazing.
Yeah, it's awesome.
But then to hear like Alex say like you did something that I would have never done, but then it worked, like that was super fun. And then all the other surprises along the way. So anyway, I'll yield.
And that's something that I'm learning too, is to just like let you guys do what you're going to do and go, well, we'll see how that goes. And there's some things that I'll suggest going, I think, after doing a bunch of these, this is my recommendation. But I love that you guys aren't listening to me all the time and doing your own thing and putting your own thing out. Like as an example, we talked about it for NAM as well, is that I've never carted something out on the floor. To me, that seemed impossible. Like, so this is the best example of this is just the idea of carting something around was like, that would be crazy. Like you would never do that. And they did it and it looked great. And I was like, well, now we have to turn that in. I went from, I would never do that. I've never heard of anyone doing that. That's a crazy idea to, we now call it the tank, and we have to build the tank, and so it's going to be a fixture, but it would have never occurred if I had been doing it. Yeah, go ahead, Laura.
One of the first things I want to say is I'm absolutely amazed at the pieces and the things I learned about the way the pieces move when we do a production like this. And as department head, the one thing I really want to say is there are a few things that I missed as far as advocating for my team. We need a 5-minute stop at the top of every hour. Cine Gear proved that. And it was just one of those things where I was remiss in advocating for it for my team. And
well, we need 5 minutes of something. You can't stop. So the main thing is
5 minutes worth, whether it's a package, a play out, something where we can get the team to take a breath and bio breaks, things like that need to happen. We had one spot where we all just like, you heard it on comps.
Yeah.
So the panel, the back end team, everything.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah. Absolutely.
And that was something I just did not advocate. I did not advocate for seeing the setup ahead. I kept thinking it'll happen, and right. It didn't.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's the thing that we see like what with all of these things. If I have a good event, I keep these things, these RFI, like while I was watching, I'm sitting there making notes. I have a long string of notes that I keep for later. That little just like, oh, we can't do this. Oh, this is great. This is not, this is whatever. If I have a perfect event where the client thinks it was the best thing ever, I'll have 75 things I didn't like, typically on average, and so that's the best part of doing these, and why we have to do more of them is to iterate. Go ahead, Dennis.
I think the biggest difference between NAMM and Cine Gear for me was the plan that the field team had in place the night before. They knew which booths they were going to in which order the day before the event. And that meant that we could build a bunch of graphics, the map in particular, which was initially John Snyder's work. I did a few tweaks to it to change the way the animations worked. So if it actually wants to transition, there we go. So you can see the location.pulses. It's animates from one location to the other. If my laptop wants to behave, which it appears not to. Oh, well, never mind. Of course, it does it just as I cut away from it. But yeah, that was one of the things that having that plan in place beforehand meant that we could do. And then, of course, we were also trailing what was coming up next, so people could start thinking of their questions before we actually got to the booth, which I think helped in terms of the number of questions we got.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
It was interesting to try to determine what things were done that have never been done before, or organically grew too out of the coverage. And I think there was room for both. I think there was room for the planning, and there was room for organic growth, because the one thing that caught my attention was when Guy was rolling past the Airy booth and heading towards Black Magic. And, he was saying the Black Magic booth is a little small. Their presence is not really huge here. And I saw something in the back, and I just said to Guy, Guy, what's that cart back there? And he immediately turned and said, let's go take a look. And the next thing you know, we got a close-up view of what it is. How often can that happen? I mean, that's literally the future of doing these events. And perhaps maybe, we should think about the idea of a studio where we have the event. I think we talked about this the other day, Alex, where we have the event and we invite the vendors to come in, and then our crew just goes around talking to them and channeling all the questions in from the panel and from Mukana for the producers out there. That's the way to consume this media in a way that makes sense, and we save a lot of travel time and expense, and it's just the future. You just keep seeing it over and over again.
Baby steps.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, and I wanted to give some attention to some people that maybe weren't front and center. One of them was Raj on the field team, who just showed up, just like, I think a clouds parted and he just arrived on the scene there on the show and really filled a very critical role of coordinating, organizing, being a liaison for the field team, doing the scout team. I don't know where he came from, but thanks, Raj. That was fantastic. Another is Eric Nathan, who really just took control of the editing team, helped us with some of our technology partners with Lucid Link, organizing a lot of the administration around those. Some of the infrastructure that you don't really see a lot. So a lot of people stepped into roles and presented roles. We had Dennis already mentioned John Snyder bringing in some graphics. So really encouraging to see people seeing the vision and seeing where they can add their own piece, or just volunteering and just being in a position that's very useful at the time that was needed.
Go ahead, Carl.
So the thing I noticed was we got a lot more booths in with Cine Gear over NAMM, which was really good. The only thing I know we're missing, and I know we want to add as a second team, something we didn't have. And that second team, I'd like to see like A teams, doesn't matter which one, if it's a lighter team or a heavier team, have that predetermined route so we know what's coming up and we can check out the websites before we hit them. But I definitely want a second team who does not have a map. I want a second team who can just go to Arri, because all the stuff I've seen from Sony and Arri, I couldn't get it through office hours. I had to go to a different vendor to actually see what was at their booth because we didn't go there. And I know we didn't go there because we didn't get a PR person that wanted to talk to us. But what I saw from other people who did go there, they just elbowed their way in, put the camera down, spoke to the PR person, and then spoke to camera themselves. So that's how they've been doing it. They just stand like right next to the camera while someone else is showing them the camera. But they will stand right next to the camera and do a whole piece to camera while they're standing next to, Ari's camera, let's say. But yeah, you kind of have to get your elbows out some of these shows just to get the footage you want. And you'll do it yourself to camera with the information you have. But we definitely need a second team, even if it's just two people with an iPhone. That's a big thing for me, I think.
Yeah, you'll find. I mean, we talked about it. I think on either Sunday or Saturday that if you look at go back to the old Pixel Core stuff and go all the way to the bottom, you'll see coverage of Cine Gear and coverage of AES and other things, and you'll find that after this, that's me after 20 shows, I'd given up on talking to the people in the booth. So if you look at all of the stuff, and there's no me because it was slowing me down too much, and so but that was like 20 shows into it. I was just like by show 5 or 6 out of 20, I was like not talking to them anymore. I was like, you're just slowing this down. You're slowing the whole conversation down. Now, I think that when we're asking questions, having them available. So for the booths that'll make it available, I thought the Deity stop was really good. I thought that I actually thought that the guys that are tying comms into walkie-talkies and stuff like that. What's funny is I wasn't that interested in the product itself. I was like, oh, there's a lot of people that do that. But as soon as he started talking about headsets, I was like, wait, what did he say? And I have to go back and, suddenly like paying a lot of attention to the headsets that he was using and everything else. And so I do think that there is I think the Q&A element can be added, but I definitely don't think we should skip booths because we can't talk to someone. We just absorb and push back out again. I agree with that. Go ahead, Laura.
I do want to say that one of our massive behind the scenes MVPs was our dev on the Makana side. Chris made some very quick changes and turned some features on for us that made it a lot easier for those of us on the back end to handle things and fix things and pick things up.
Yeah. And I think we're gonna be able to get better at that. I mean, I think we learned a lot from this last week, and then we now have time to give Chris time to kind of work through some ideas.
But I don't think Chris is not a face here, but Chris is with us every day in Mukana. Yeah. And I just want to thank him for the fact that he was able to, we would say, well, we're looking at this. How do we? And between you and Chris and the conversations, it was amazing to push that fast.
It's nice having a developer that can just turn something around in the heart. Like usually you think in most development cycles, when I think of it, when I work with external teams, it's like, oh, well, we'll have that done in 6 months or, or a year or 3 months. And with Chris, it's usually measured in
3 days,
hours, days, weeks, that kind of thing. Go ahead, Roscoe.
Yeah, I think that what I was most impressed with is that, after trade shows, you kind of become, what is the word, numb to them a little bit. And there's a party atmosphere to a trade show, which is kind of, it's fun to be there. And I really think that's what we got to. We got to where it was fun. I was having fun again at a trade show. Having Raj there was critical because he would go forward and prepare the booth. So it was a lot less stress on us that the booth knew we were coming and all that kind of stuff. Can't underestimate the nicety it is to know that they're going to respond to you when you get to the booth. Black Magic, by the way, only happened because the booth we were going to, which was the cutouts, the foam cutout person who had then prints on it, does a very professional job and all that he wasn't available. He was involved with it. He was a one-man booth. He was involved with a customer in a deep conversation, which had to do with a purchase. We didn't want to interrupt that and take away his commerce. So we just pivoted and said, hey, Guy, and having Guy there who was able to handle everything. I don't think there was a subject in that thing. So having the correct host, George was amazing at NAMM for the same reason. We did tend to focus a little bit more on microphones because that was his strength, or studio construction. That was his strength, and that's the good thing, to play to his strength. We have a couple of hosts. One specializes audio, one specializes video. That would work amazingly too.
Yeah, it'd be fun at some point. I mean, it just depends on how big we get, is to have 2 or 3 people when you're bouncing and that we're going to go to video, to audio, to something else and just keep bouncing around and you're getting this thing from different folks. It would be really interesting. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, Guy, I have to applaud everybody on the back end, and Guy did a fabulous job of hosting and being able to pivot and ask the right questions. Of course, being a retailer, he knows a lot of that equipment and has a lot of experience with that equipment and knows what equipment is coming out because he gets advance notice a lot of times from the manufacturers. And that's one thing I think really helped out in going to the second day of the show and not the first day of the show, allowed the crew to get there the first day and prepare and shoot those packages ahead of time. And that would be a good thing to do, is to go around the booth the first day and gather a silent video, just a drive-by of each booth slowly, and you could play that on a loop prior to the show with a countdown clock on it. And that way we could go, rather from going regular from our panel, our office hours regular show from the panel directly into the show, we could do a 15-minute break in there where this loop plays so that people can see the booths that are coming up, and they might be able to see something in one of those booths that goes by during this drive-by, silent drive-by, and want to ask questions about it later. So that gives you a little bit of a preview. It gives the panelists. I know I was sitting in this chair for 8 hours that day because getting in at 6 to do the panel in the morning, 3 hours of that, followed by 5 hours of without a break, except for that 11-minute. Thank God for that 11-minute roll-in prepared video, because it allowed us to all get up and take a nature break and fix another glass of tea and get a power bar. When's lunch? But I think it all worked really well, and I think just a few tweaks to it, it would make it really great.
I think it's fun. It's fun for us to talk about stuff and talk about post-production and production and everything else. There is just something about the adrenaline of doing it, and being in the middle of it, and it being sometimes long hours and hard. And there's some, I remember I was talking to a friend of mine about after you pull all-nighters, and you have that smell in your nose of pulling an all-nighter. You can't describe it. I can't decide what it is, but it's I pulled an all-nighter. And there's some kind of, I don't know, pressure-induced reward there. Go ahead, Noah.
The feeling that you felt like you just ran into a brick wall and you're like stunned and you're like dazed. I know that feeling for sure. I was going to bring us back to the content. And so specifically, if you look at NAB, NAM, and Cine Gear, it was almost like we had 3 different iterations or approaches to how we did the show floor and a panel and interviews even. And so maybe we could reflect on that and see what worked. With Powers, Jeffrey Powers, it was really cool because he was able to do kind of what Alex explained and do a summary every now and then and just have him be on camera. Obviously, we did interviews as well. And then when we moved to NAM with George, we did more dense conversations, right? So we were there longer and we didn't cover as many booths. And then with Guy, obviously, we were able to turn up the heat and get the pace moving. But I'll also say that when we spoke to each booth, we told them, hey, you have 2 to 4 minutes. Give us what's new, what's fresh, and what's special this year, right? And then after that 2 to 4 minutes, we did roughly 5-6 minutes of questions. At least that was the hope. Sometimes that broke off of that format. But that's where what we kind of iterated to, and I'm sure obviously we can go from there. But like another cool thing, like Alex said, is like we have the tank unit, right? So maybe we could have scouts, so to speak, right? So these scouts would just be the iPhone, and that could be behind the scenes, but it could also be the B-roll that we're talking about, like Courtney said, of the different booths. Like we can have 2 or 3 scouts that basically literally scout the floor, but also give us creative, interesting shots of both our crew, but of the event itself. So I think those would be cool. And then coming back to the developer, which Marcelo will talk next, what was cool is with StreamVOOODOO, that was our client, to send stuff out. We made a separate link for my phone, and he was iterating as we went, which was kind of cool. And we didn't quite get the update in time, and I basically just hunkered down and focused on the kit. But maybe Marcelo can talk about his thoughts next too.
Yeah, and as far as the format goes, I mean, the thing that I've been really thinking about there is that I think that we eventually we're going to want a booth there. Like, and the good news for us is that space is not hard to get now. It used to be like a really competitive thing, but I think having a booth there, it gives us somewhere to go, and it also, kind of hubs, and we can bring people in and have them sit down and talk to us for a little bit if we want. Just gives us another place to go. And then I think that the tank, so to speak, I've been really thinking about it over the weekend, and I think that we want to think about it being in 2 places an hour. So the tank just goes, it's got top of the hour, bottom of the hour. We're going to be at the tank. We're going to hit the booth once an hour, typically, to have some conversation. And I start thinking of it as, we were going to talk radio about on Friday, but I start thinking about the pie chart, like of when we're doing things. But and then you have, you have that set up, and then if we have a roaming crew, that roaming crew is trying to get probably 2 things an hour. I'm sorry, 2 things every half hour. So 4 an hour is where that roaming crew goes. And if we have 2, then 2 roaming crews, we would do it twice that many. Like it would really, start to stuff it up a little bit. And then we have packages that we kind of glue everything else together with. So it's just like and I think you'd end up with a very dense, 8 to 10 locations an hour. Some of them very short. Some of them are 2 minutes long, or an hour, minute and a half, 2 minutes long hits. Without a lot of Q&A, and some of them are longer Q&As and so on and so forth. But I think that the real opportunity with the expo is to get to almost, not to everything, but to get to a vast majority of the booths. And, some of them we're covering heavily and some of them are covering lightly and, that type of thing. But I think that can help us put together a pretty interesting set of programming that would, if we did that, it would definitely be far and away the best coverage of an event, combined with the online panel, combined with the remote people able to ask questions and be part of a conversation. That together, then we can give people multiple ways to watch some of it. So like, for instance, the main booth we could get to a point where there's 3 or 4 feeds coming out, on Zoom, where you just go into a different room and there's a different thing to watch. There's the mainstream, but there's lots of little things that dig into things deeper and so on and so forth. I'm not going to say we're going to do that right now, but it could get pretty intense. Go ahead, Marcelo.
Yeah, besides that, I just wanted to say that the scene from Guy Cochran running and going super fast with his hair and everything.
That was funny.
That's a before and after. Like, so, no, but
I kind of feel like we have to do that in every show now. Like that's like, we have to perfect it. We have to like tear down the Federighi the one and then figure out exactly how to produce it. And then that's just something that we do for all the shows anyway.
We have that if you guys want to see it.
Right. So that was what, something impressive. But besides that, I just wanted to say that I think the way that this happened, that I just reached out to Noah before the Cine Gear, actually before NAMM, and we talked about what they needed, and I just gave like a little training to some of the people, and that they were volunteering to do this. It was so quick and so nice for them to see that StreamVOOODOO was super seamless for them to know how it's how it's going to work and how you can just push things through. That I'm really proud of, having that opportunity to showcase that, okay, it's a seamless process. You just we'll send the feed out and that's about it. So thanks for the opportunity to just bring that to the table, because when I saw the show happening and the feeds working and everything, of course, you said, Alex, it's a Mr. Net or something, that the provider of the internet, which is what we need. But other than that, I think that it was a great job, and the feeds were looking great. Yeah.
Absolutely. Now go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, I think what would be really interesting to hear from the panel as well as the wider community is what out of each of the 3 you liked the best. Because I think something from each will create the best version as we go forward into the next kind of ones. And for me, from where I was sitting, helping understand what of the iterations that we made between each one that you really loved will really help kind of understand, okay, well, where are we hitting things out of the park? Where we kind of need to spend more RFI? Because it's like NAB was basically from the back end, from my feeling in the back end was like, I just hope it holds all together. I'm pretty sure we can get through it no matter what, but hey, I just kind of hope it holds together. And then NAMM was, yes, okay, everything worked. Let's keep on doing this, and let's see if we can test this new StreamVOOODOO and test this the new audio. Mickey, by the way, oh my goodness, Mickey, thank you, sir, because we'll probably get into audio another time. And then CineGear was like, okay, now we know the tech works, now we can play. So it'd just be interesting to hear what were the iterations, what that people really loved.
Yeah, and I think that like everything else, a year ago we were trying to figure out how to do 2.0. Like, a year ago we were sitting there fiddling, like, it literally was crashing and falling apart, and even Dub wasn't as clean as we wanted it to be and everything else. And it was funny because we got to this one and it was like, yeah, and then we do the thing, and so I think that I believe that a year from now, especially if we do, we're talking about it, as Richard said, if we keep on doing these postmortems and really figuring out and learning and iterating, I think that we are going to very quickly get to something that's very automatic for us, that you could do, that we could cover something, like we're talking about, there's something coming, SIGGRAPH is only 2 months away or whatever, and people are worried. I think we're going to get to a point where we're like, man, we got 2 of them this week. and we're just, it's not there's a machine that just kind of churns through the system, that is painful right now, become a lot less painful. I think before we jump into the next thing, I guess my high points is that I still want to see more. I want to see more booths, to have, more coverage. I want to put less pressure on the panel, just to stretch between them. I want to get more experts for that specific thing. So I think that what Bill bringing some experts in, I think worked really well. That have been there a bunch of times and know it. So at SIGGRAPH, I'm going to try to get some friends of mine from the visual effects community to, if we're able to do it, to be on the panel, to be on the ground, learning from what Bill did there to figure out how to really, tie those things together. So those are the high level things that from just a content perspective, I think I saw. But go ahead and throw your own stuff into the list here. Next question.
Michael Sweeney from Chicago. Having covered recent conventions live, is it time to branch out further and head to Oshkosh, Wisconsin for EAA Airventure 2022? From antique to experimental, warbird to ultralight, daily and evening air shows.
Go ahead, Noah.
So I know Michael Sweeney's really excited about this. We'll need to figure out from the community who can actually go in person. So for me, I actually have a request for Alex. So before, when we look back at NAMM and Cine Gear, what we did is Alex sent out a form, people filled it out, and it worked for what we needed to get us going. We actually created a second form that had more detail and more data, essentially, right, that helped us form departments and other things. So my ask really for Alex is, could we have a few days and revise a form that we send out and go for each different event?
I'm happy to do it. So the main thing is that I do those things. I generally do those things in two layers, which is that I want to. The problem is you give people a long form and you actually end up with less people. It's easier to say, "Hey, are you interested?" And then if they say they're interested, send them something, deeper. It just people glaze over. So I just want to get the people in the list that are remotely interested, and then start to iterate from there. So that's why I do that two layer thing, which is pretty common for me.
Totally. Yeah. And so like the 2 layer, we can start the first one and maybe that can go out however you send it out, like normal. For me, it's super crucial to have a minimum number of volunteers across different aspects, specifically with the Boots on the Ground team. This is going to sound crazy, but we started with 8 volunteers and we ended up with 3. Right? So it doesn't matter what the event is. To me, you should double or triple what we think we actually need, because people, life happens, right? People are going to have to drop out. So I would say the minimum to me, like if there are not 6 people who say they can go and sign up, then it's not worth doing, in my opinion.
Again, for something like Oshkosh, I would say, or 2 that are absolutely going to be there, because it's really like we're not covering booths at Oshkosh. I don't think Oshkosh has booths. I think what Oshkosh has is planes, and so I think that I'm open to it, but we have to find at least 2 or 3, and they have to be like absolutely no matter what, they'll do it. And again, we're not in the mode where we're doing these more for ourselves at the moment. We're not going to turn the pipe up too publicly yet, because we're still figuring stuff out. But so I think we could cover anything, because we're not doing it in front of thousands of people yet. We're doing it in front of our group, and we're still iterating and figuring it out. Go ahead, Roscoe.
Yeah, Oshkosh has everything: booths, planes, big displays, everything. You name it, Oshkosh. Car shows. Oshkosh. Do you think it's about planes? But there's everything there.
No, I think about planes.
And so you have to pick. My thing is finding the expert, finding the person who can go to Oshkosh and tell the story, or get the story out of the people that they're going to interview. So and to me, it lends itself to a lot of packages, a huge number of packages where you could just go out and do that. I think we might lose because of how large it is, the fun of being able to move booth to booth to booth in a relatively quick amount of time.
Yeah, unlike the technical conferences we're used to, that one is just, every picture I've seen looks like it's shoulder to shoulder, thousands of people. It could be hard to move around from a camera perspective. Go ahead. But we should, if people are open to it, I'm happy to try it. Go ahead, John.
My dad flew his private plane to Oshkosh every year and brought back thousands of pictures. This show is absolutely amazing. It would be great to do it.
Courtney?
Yeah, I think a guy is going to have to brush up on his wing walking skills to get those great on a
And again, we also don't have to be, we can go for a day, and however it turns out is however it turns out. And then we learn, okay, this is how we come back, and we'll learn a bunch of things. And we go, okay, if we go to Oshkosh next year, we can't go to Oshkosh. We can only we have to go the first time to figure out how to do it next time. So I'm, again, if people are open to doing it, even if it's I'm willing to open it up. And even if it's just, we just watch it and there's one camera roaming around showing us, it's going to have people on the ground having us understand what that show looks like from our perspective would be valuable to us. Go ahead, Roscoe.
Oh, okay. So I know a person, I was thinking the other thing we can do is become a production crew. The person who's in front of the camera doesn't necessarily have to come from our talent base. Because I immediately comes to mind, I watch a guy named Juan Brown, who is Blanco Lario channel, who's a 777 pilot who goes to these shows and talks to and finds an interesting story. We could add so much to an individual. So a person who's really knowledgeable in that area, if we show up as a production crew, we could knock it out of the park.
And I have a feeling that I'm going to hear some discords as well. We had definitely have pilots, quite a few pilots in our membership. Yeah, so right. I think that we can definitely get people on the panel to jump on and be here in Zoom. That's the real power of this. We could theoretically have someone on the ground that is literally the camera person wandering around, and we're just telling them what to point at. And this is another format that I think is coming for us is a talentless ground crew, which is, I think it's very powerful to have someone like Guy or someone, those are things that are, I think are really useful in what we've done. But I think we also want to look at shows that we don't have the right talent to put on the ground. What we're going to do is just put a camera on the ground as a stringer and get feeds back and talk about what we're looking at. Go ahead, Noah. And
Alex means on-air talent, by the way.
Talentless ground crew. Sorry. Yeah. We tend to call it talent. So for those listening, talent is the person above the line or the person in front of the camera. So when we call it talentless, we've sent out a lot of crews that we call talentless ground crews, which means that they're there as stringers, and they just pull video in. But yeah, not talentless as well below the line, or talentless above the line. Not meaning that they don't have talent, that's just not there. Go ahead, Noah.
And I just wanted to clarify. So for me, and what I'm most interested in, and this is a little bit selfish, is like I want each production to be bigger and better and more refined. So that's the projects that I'm most interested in, right? I want the hard problems that we're solving. Whereas like what we're describing now is totally cool too. We should do these projects where it's a smaller crew and not the full tank rig and scout rig, like smaller rigs. Like those are definitely needed. I'm personally less interested, but I would still consider supporting those myself. So.
My whole thing is that I definitely am hungry to do both. I look at all these different things, in how do we cover the world for our group and for the rest of the world? How do we connect the rest of the world with physical events so we can watch them, experience them, learn from them, from these events? And so. I think that we will continue to build larger and larger crews. I think that for some of these events, we're going to get to a point that we'll have, 20, 30 people on the ground, 150 people online, and it'll be these massive experiences that are, you're just seeing all of this stuff. I mean, that's where I think this is going to go inside of 48. I would say inside of 2 or 3 years, we'll be at these, there'll be, and I think it'll happen about once a month, that we'll have this huge group of people coming together to cover these things, and it'll be unlike anything anybody's ever seen, because we are suddenly connecting the world to that physical event. That physical event is creating a convenient place for us to, and it's really good for the event, and it's really good for us, to kind of build that skill set, and it's also really good for everyone watching. So I think that those will get bigger, and I think that's the direction you're going, is like, how do we get the next step up, to that? But I think we have to always be looking at these little ones that we can experiment in. We can figure out how do we, because we're gonna like I learned from you that you can cart something around in the thing. We want to have these little ones where we go, oh, we can do this, and oh, we can do that, or this, we get really good at it. And what'll happen is those little ones will create these learnings that we end up using on the big ones. But there will be a point where we're going to get to this point within probably 5 to 6 of these where we can't experiment on the big ones anymore. Like the big ones are. We're going to add one thing to every big one, and that's it. Like, it'll be one little thing but we still need all these little ones to do we'll do a lot of things and be willing to fail and everything else. Not having a place to fail really slows things down, and so we just need lots of places that we can keep on experimenting. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, to your earlier point about crews and how we build those up. In all fairness to Noah, we've kind of taken a big chunk of his time, because he's donating his time and his gear and expertise, and he can't do this forever. I mean, he's got a life to live and other work to do. So I think we need to build on making it easier for our core group to also have the flexibility to pick and choose the events they can do.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Roy Myers from Bel Air, Maryland. The other week, Noah was showing an iPhone Ethernet charging dongle. Said he hadn't tried it yet. Did it work well at the show, and which one is it specifically?
Go ahead, Noah.
Yeah, so I actually bought 4 of these dongles to try out. I think Roscoe bought 2 as well. So I would say 2 of them, for some reason, the lightning or whatever connection wasn't going in all the way. So those 2 failed, obviously. As far as the Ethernet jack, that was fine. And then I think the other 2 that I tried as well, basically the USB for the mix pre wasn't working. And so that was my own fault. Carl corrected me and told me something I should have tried, which was putting it in 24-bit instead of 32-bit float. So that might have made the difference. But the reality is, speaking of Mitchell's comment from the last question, I had my own paid projects going on. I'm an owner of a small production company here in Southern California. And so my prep time for the show went away. And I was kind of MIA for parts of like the weeks leading up to the project, to Cine Gear and both NAMM. So the short of it is I only spent 10 minutes with these devices, and I said, you know what, I know something that works. It's going to be funky and people are going to be surprised, but I think that move worked. And the only reason why we added the second camera in the Atem was because I already had the double header on the stand. One was supposed to be for the iPhone and one was supposed to be for the mix pre. And it just clicked for me, like, that's A and B camera right there. You know, you have 2 shots, and let's try it. And it worked.
Go ahead, Roscoe.
Noah, what was the company that makes that iPad switcher? I'm drawing a blank. We've had them on here. They make a. You can switch iPhones with an iPad. Cinemaker. Thank you. They have a recommended dongle that looks exactly like the one you're going to get from Amazon, but I would go with the Cinemaker one. It's only like $25, but the shipping charge.
Next question.
Next question from Guy Cochran in Seattle, USA. How could we have made the show 4K?
Go ahead, Noah.
So Alex had this really high hope of 4K 60, which is awesome. I would love to get there. I think it's a matter of consistent bandwidth. So maybe with the live view, that would make the difference, getting us to that speed. But I mean, the MrNet device is great, but at the same time, it's not going to give us, I think, the throughput that we need for 4K. We talked about VP9 over StreamVOOODOO, so maybe Marcelo can talk about that codec. I know he was saying that they might be able to introduce AV1, which is even a more efficient codec. So those are things that would probably help get us there.
Yep, Dennis?
One of the pieces that's currently missing from making it 4K is graphics. All of the graphics for these shows so far have been done by me sending it over Zoom, and that means obviously that it's not going to be any more than 108p. There is work going on to bring the graphics and video playout into the system itself, and at that point it can then be 4K. It also means that other people be able to run the graphics rather than just me, which is an exciting step because it will mean that we can teach other people the system.
Yeah, I think we absolutely have to, by the next one, really have it done inside of our system. So we'll keep working on moving that forward, because we will be at 4K this year. So it's just a matter of, the only parts that'll be 1080p are our contribution as panelists right now, but the rest of it will be. The rest of it will be 4K. Go ahead, Marcelo.
Yeah, I was just going to say what Noah was mentioning. I think BP9 was working great. We do have AV1, which you really liked it, and I think this is a great major step. With AV1, the efficiency on the bandwidth is much better, so we may try that at least on the sending. But the bandwidth is important to have.
I don't think that. I think that I don't think there's an issue with the transport. I think it's just the bandwidth, and having enough consistent bandwidth is going to be hard, to get out of one of these venues. So that'll be the real thing that we have to kind of tackle for that process. And we're the other thing that I'm committed to is 4K 60 HDR. So in 5.1.
Of course.
So I know how to do that. So we're definitely going to be on the path to creating that experience. Again, no later than the end of the year, but probably sooner.
Yeah, for sure. And HLS, these other good stuff that we're talking about. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, so I've been putting a bit of thought into the 4K from the field. because you're right. The cameras aren't that hard. Encoding's not that hard. There's a lot of ways to do that on the ground from 12-volt batteries. It's actually not that hard. It's a bandwidth. There is one thing I have been wanting to try out, which is a single SIM solution rather than a bonded, because bonded gets quite expensive if we have to. Well, we can borrow, a U800 or something like that, but you can't have a U8. We can't afford a U800 for 3 or 4 different contributors. We may be able to borrow 1. I don't know if we can borrow 4. That may be pushing it a bit hard for each U800 be doing a 4K 60. So what I wanted to try was a Nighthawk M5 in 5G with a antenna, with a TS9 antenna, with a marine antenna, which is omnidirectional. So this is a 1-foot white antenna, or with a directional antenna, which will get you twice as much gain. But this is something you're right, it's a bottleneck, but it's a bottleneck for like the smaller teams who just don't have we may not have a U800 for all the smaller teams, but we still want to get 4K contribution from them. So the camera is, the camera's probably going to be a broadcast, G2 if we can for larger ones, and then down to an iPhone or something like that for the smaller teams. But they're getting the stuff back. The M5, the Nighthawk M5, and an external antenna, marine antenna, because it's omnidirectional, is something I'd like to play with.
Yeah, and I know that what I just said before sounds absurd and way overkill, and I've literally made my entire business around doing things that are absurd. so like that's so I find that is the easiest path to growth. Go ahead, John.
Everything that Carl said, and not by using the Blackmagic WebPresenter 4K. Alex, I don't know if you saw the experiment that Doug Johnson did with the 4K, but we could not get it to transmit reliably 4K to YouTube. It was much more reliable if we went up to AWS than YouTube directly. It was super weird. We think it's a software bug in the unit.
Do you know how much bandwidth you were sending to YouTube?
About 30.
Okay, yeah, because that's about what we do, about 35. And for us, it's been seamless, to do it through Elementals, though. These are just big hardware appliances. Go ahead, Josh.
There's a couple of technical ways that we might work around the bandwidth issues. One of them has to do with, a couple of them have to do with some of our technology partners. So StreamVOOODOO has the opportunity that we could do multiple different transports. So if a 4K one is giving us trouble, we have a backup that we can do for 1080p. Mm-hmm. Also, Lucid Link, we were using that extensively in this broadcast where we were contributing a very fast upload speed. So having a terrestrial recording there that later gets uploaded for content that's particularly stuff that's high detail that you want in that, we could work that into our workflow as well.
Good guy.
Yeah, the Bolt from Teradek, this guy right here, will do 4K HDR wireless. So if we could get a hardwired connection and then put the receiver at the hardwire and then roam the floor, this thing will do over a mile. Well, the big one will. So, this might be a possible solution if we can get a loaner either from Teradek or somehow finagle enough money to buy one.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that we've used bolts. We've used 3 bolts at one time, or 4 bolts at one time for various locations. And then the live view is the thing that pumps the final, and we're cutting it. We actually put it on a person that could sit there and tap on a screen and actually cut the show. Next question.
Roscoe Jones, Brea, California. Should we only take written questions from panelists when we know that the field question prompter is working?
Go ahead, Laura.
Alex and I have talked about this, and open speaker next to the person in the booth is what we've talked about as the prime option. Going through Guy, you did a great job, but it feels awkward. I went back and watched some of it. It does feel awkward because
the audience hears us. The audience hears because the problem with we were talking about it. Laura and I were talking about it earlier. Was the problem really is that when you can talk, you ask much more kind of run-on complicated questions. And then Guy has to regurgitate that back out, and the viewer gets to see both. And it's like not a great experience. Like it's just like completely like, whoa, that didn't work. And so but I think that an open speaker, to Laura's point, I think would work really well. Go ahead, John.
You guys hit the nail on the head. That's exactly, we're very frustrated in providing a good conversation between us and whoever we're interviewing.
And we've used open speakers for a lot of things, and I think we can put a really solid open speaker there, I don't think we have to worry about how much sound it makes in the rest of the building. And we just have to make sure we're not getting feedback from the mic. Go ahead, Bill.
My position in this one was I wanted us to try as many new things as possible, and that's something we had not gotten the thread from the office hour panelist right to the field. And so I thought it was an interesting experiment, but I kind of agree. I think it did get a little too complicated for Guy. There's
no indictment of doing it. There's just a learning that we shouldn't do that again. Like no one's ever tried that before, and now we have, and now we know. Go ahead, Carl.
So I will always punch for the text on the screen first, 100%, because it allows the person answering the questions to see the question and think about it, rather than hit them with a question they don't know about. This was something we actually saw in NAMM a little bit. But open speaker would work for certain scenarios where it's quiet. So NAMM was not the place for that. But Cine Gear was much quieter, of course. The open speaker would make a lot more sense if we want a conversation back and forth. But for questions from Meccana, not from the panelist, they should always be 100%. What I'm talking about is if we have a question that's in Meccana that is text, I wouldn't want Bill reading that question out via open speaker. I want them to read it. But if we have a question from the panelist, like a follow-up question that's a quick one, then yes, open speaker.
And I think that I just think there's something transformational about having the panel be able to have a conversation with the person on the ground. There's something about that really crests over something, especially as we move forward and we pack. I mean, if we go to ones like SIGGRAPH that we pack with a couple of VFX folks here in the panel, and they're asking questions, we learn a lot from that conversation. They'll ask questions that we won't even think about, and so the thing is having, these subject experts in the panel that don't have to go to the event, but can still interact with them and letting us listen to that. That's, that in the subject matter that we're dealing with, that's like being a kid listening to the grownups, talking about how they folks that do this every day. And definitely in certain areas we have a lot of verticals, so we understand what to talk about. But I think that I want to be able to go to places that I don't know as well. Like if we're talking about AWS reInvent, there's a whole bunch of stuff I won't understand, but I want someone who's an expert here to ask those questions while we're doing it. Go ahead, Noah.
I just want to be clear, and we're on the record for this because I have this recorded from several meetings, but we've talked, Carl and I and Josh and I, several of us several times talked about we do not want the echo happening of like the panel asks it, then the field reporter asks it, and then, so we tried our best to avoid that, but at some point it just happened. So we did think ahead and tried to fix that the best we could. Obviously it didn't work out like we hoped exactly, but that's okay. I will say the two other options that have been offered, we did have a secondary phone with comms with a mix minus. So thank you, Mickey, for setting that up. We did use it at the very, very end for the single person for NAMM. The last interview had that, and that worked pretty well. The thing is disposable headphones, right? And so Josh has said, and I'm sure with a little bit of funding, we could buy $5 or $10 headphones and literally just go through them. But what would be cool is even if it was branded as like office hours and had the headphone with a label on it, and then they get that merch from us.
Sponsored by Linsol.
Sure,
Just give them little
sponsored by Sure or whatever. Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, we could probably get a hold of that company. I bet those. I've worked with some companies like that in the past. They'll just send you like a pack of 100 of them.
Yeah,
go ahead,
that's all we need.
Yeah, what I would like to see, and I don't even know if it's possible, is a small 12-inch teleprompter mounted with the camera behind it, and a feed from the either office hours program or just a private Zoom channel, so that the switchers on the back end could switch whatever panelist wants to ask that question, so that the person you're speaking to looks into the camera and sees the person they're talking to. I don't know if we can get lip sync done correctly with the latency, and the echo cancellation, of course, is a challenge. But I think there's means of handling that, and Zoom does a really good job of echo cancellation. But I don't know if that's possible to use Zoom as that connection rather than whatever we were using for our backhaul from the location. I think the image back to the rolling tank as Alex describes it.
Yeah, and this is a rig that we've used in the past that we built many years ago. I think this is probably 2013. So it's almost 10 years ago. But that is a wireless rig. You can see the little speaker below it. You can see the monitor there hooked up to it with the light and the mic. And this was just this roams. You put it on a shoulder mount, and it's two-way wireless. And it just kind of roams around. People can talk right into it. I know that will sound crazy, but that was actually used for a wedding. So anyway, go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, continuing the conversation about the the fold back, either video or audio. It was something that we had discussed, and we decided to move past it because of the complexity of it. But definitely something that we can look to in the future. One thing you might want to consider is audio sync for them getting the questions. So if, for example, someone in the panel is asking a question, we'd want that audio sync to work, and that's doable. We've spoken to. You
mean audio sync in the return video to them?
Exactly.
I don't think that matters, to be honest with you.
But and the other thing is kind of mix minus for video as well. You don't want the panels to see themselves, so program feed wouldn't be out. But an active speaker back to it is one of the things that we had discussed, and something you could push back.
Yeah, the reason I don't do audio sync for the person on the production side, unless I'm going to see it in the program, is because it slows the conversation down, because you're now delaying the audio more times than you need to. So that's the only reason I don't worry about it. Like if you're on the other side and you're seeing it, I don't really care. You get the point. Go ahead, Laura.
One of the things, Alex, you and I had talked about is if we took text-only questions from the panel, is the equity with our audience. Is how do we balance that? And the other thing that I'm sitting here thinking about as we're talking about the back is, what would I need to do to get that video back? Because we have a TD with a switcher that's switching program. What is that pipeline going to look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the back and forth will also be harder if we go to a higher band, to the 4K stuff, because we'll have a delay. So the text will be probably the primary thing that we do, in that environment. Go ahead, Noah.
So the video return we did have for NAMM. And so I had a secondary display, which I literally Velcroed to the back of my monitor. The teleprompter idea is something I also thought of. I literally have 3 12-inch prompters, and I was this close from grabbing one and sticking it on the rig, but I decided not to because of weight and size. But Guy and I had a good conversation. Let me just say, a few iterations from now, I'm excited to see what the tank looks like, because I have lots of thoughts, and I'm sure Guy has lots of thoughts too.
Yeah, I will say this one that I showed earlier is that as a result of years of teleprompters on the cameras, and we moved away from it because it was too hard to read. Like it was just the angles and everything else. And so the first ones I got were all on camera, and we just found them too hard to deal with. And so we slowly moved to it, and we actually found them looking a little under the camera, didn't bother us. So good, Josh.
Yeah, Alex, that might be more prophetic, with that long teleprompter on the front screen and the barrel. We get our tank treads on it. It's actually starting to look like an actual tank.
I think
the howitzer lens.
If we give it tank tracks, like the big one on the back and the little one, and then all we have to do is set it up so that it's got like a little Bluetooth or a little ultra wide bandwidth. And it just follows you around. So as you walk, you just see this little tank, just kind of, no one's pushing it. It just kind of like just tanks along. It would totally work. Next question.
Make your cart go.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I wanted to say that wasn't what I wanted to say, though. But as far as the contributing from the panel to the field, currently our field view does not include the hands when they're raised. So that's not something that's broadcasted to it. That's something programmatically that we could add to it, and then come up with a nice way to hand that off to where you could have that quick retort questions from the panelists to say, to retort on something quick, a low latency response to things.
We're going to keep going because we're never going to get to the end of these questions, and I have a pretty hard out. So next question.
Next question from Guy Cochran. He wants to know, what was your favorite part of the Cine Gear coverage?
Go ahead, Roscoe.
I'll make it fairly quick. George and Noah building stuff in the morning. This is behind the scenes, 2 behind the scenes things. Just incredible to watch Noah work and his brain and come up with it and just solve problems, and really is a fantastic person to just work with. When Raj showed up it just took an incredible burden and made all those things that Noah and I would have loved to have done. We would have had to do it out of our brains later in the day because we couldn't document at the time. And Raj just documented and made it so incredible for us.
I'm hearing something from somebody.
And then finally, when Guy just said, "Follow me," that was, he totally, he said, "Okay, we've done it this way." And he said, "We're just going to go over here, guys." And we're like, "Can we do it?" "Sure. Okay, just roll." We went with it. So
Yeah,
I'll stop.
And again, we want to keep on experimenting like that, Mitchell.
Yeah, the favorite thing for me was the thing I worked on, of course. Noah called me the day before the event and said, "Look, we want to do this Chris Federici gag with Guy, and we can't shoot it until tomorrow morning," which turned out to be literally during office hours. So I guess that's it. So if you want to see what it was, here it is.
Prepare for launch in 3, 2, 1.
Hey, now we're back inside, and we're going to talk to Canon. Back to you, Bill.
And that was the gag. I mean, it only lasted, 15 seconds, but it's those little pieces.
The fact that we were able to add it just after it was shown in a week, in the same week beforehand, I thought was just fantastic. Like
I was editing it while office hours was going on just before we switched to it. But anyhow, that was fun for me.
That's great. Marcelo.
Yeah, that was great. I was going to say that. But besides that, one of the contents that I saw that were good was this guy from Canon. When Guy was talking with the guy from Canon, the guy was explaining all these lenses and how they work and everything. Mm-hmm. And it was very, very interesting to see and how passionate he was, right? And I was watching the stream and I saw that. That was pretty cool.
That's great. Josh?
Yeah, I appreciated, given that we had some lead time, there was a lot of graphics that were prepared ahead of time, like the work that Dennis and John did on the maps, the graphical elements that added to the show, like telling us where we were going next, having those elements put on the screen, I think really helped engagement. And also we were able to use Lucid Link to capture a lot of the events. And before the end of the show, have a quick turnaround, highlight, recap at the end. I think it really worked out well.
Absolutely. Next question.
And it's Guy again with a question. How did the back-end folks handle when we detoured to the Fujinon and Blackmagic design booths? Was it calm on comms?
Go ahead, Richard.
It's always calm on comms. That's the way we roll. Yeah. I think my memory of it might be slightly different. So Raj in the chat can tell me if it's incorrect. But the Blackmagic booth was a setup movement in that it was fortuitous that the chap, as we said earlier on, we wanted to go to the build, my builder case was busy. So Raj actually was in my ear kind of saying, well, shall we go to this other booth and just do something in front of it? So we had a wee discussion before we actually went over it and queued it. And then that allowed the team to kind of move over. And then we did a kind of that allowed us to set up then a live transition back over to my builder case, and that set up the very last hour of just starting to, because it worked. And we can only do this because we felt that the StreamVOOODOO connection was so solid all the way through the show. So when we moved from Blackmagic back to my builder case, my case builder, I'm definitely getting that wrong somehow. It worked so smoothly that we could actually then start to keep on doing live transitions to the next, like just keep it doing walk and talks for the very last hour, which then created the opportunity for the Fujinon. So which I did at one point feel that this is possibly going to go wrong when we had to start talking the guy into actually appearing. I thought, oh, have we made a mistake here? But thankfully, Guy managed to get him to stand on camera and actually talk to us.
All right, next, go ahead. I'm sorry, I was the wrong one. Laura?
Yeah, and I want to thank Richard because listening to Richard made my job so easy sitting on the back end, and hats off to the entire team. But Richard was kind of the one that was communicating all the information and making the decisions, and it was just an amazing. We've had 2 amazing events.
Yep. Go ahead, Bill.
I didn't know until I watched part of it back just to see how things went, but I didn't realize that Mark Masonov had talked to the guy with the little screw-on quarter 20 wire clips, and then I realized that Guy talked to him afterwards as an interview piece, and it felt unbelievable to me in this respect. It felt like we had discovered something, then we went to look at it and presented it as a live discovery and explanation and talking to the expert. That seemed like I had never seen that in anything before. I don't know whether he was on your radar, Guy, and that you were going there anyway, but it really did feel like this was an audience or an in-the-moment driven piece of content capture that really shocked me watching the show back.
Next question.
Jonas Dottil from Stuttgart. How are we make sure that these coverages stay sustainable so we can keep doing them?
Go ahead, Noah.
That is a question we should often be asking ourselves, like the sustainability question. So currently we have several bottlenecks in our system, which we've talked about before. It's when problem solvers like us decide to go ahead and make the thing happen by coming up with their own creative solutions, right? So I've been there, JJ, Dennis, even Alex, like, so all of us in our own ways have made this work for ourselves, but then we got to figure out how that actually scales out to other people. And how do we create a repeatable system that isn't limited by one person or one set of people, right? We also need to minimize the production time. And I think over time, we're going to have orders of magnitude of less time that we'll spend prepping for these events. And like Alex said, we might do, a couple of months or what have you. So having that time and consistency is huge. Minimizing the crew, right? So we have a streamlined of who's doing what. And then, like I said, considering the scale is the main thing of how we're going to scale up our current systems so that we could do dozens, if not hundreds of these.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, one word for you, Jonas. Robotics. This is what the tank should look like. Johnny 5, you remember him. You've got 2 cameras on the top for your dual coverage. You can hand him a hand mic in one of his hands there for that. All you have to do is mount a return video iPad or 12-inch monitor on his chest, and you're ready to go.
Yeah, the first step is it has to be a clean show all the way through. We have to be able to create 2 or 3 hours that just looks like a show. We're not quite there yet. So like until we get to that point, we need to, it's going to be very hard to get all the other support that we need. As someone who's done this for a long time, it's closing that up. So we have to do things like have standard mic plugs, have a clean run of show, have, and we can't we don't know what we're going to do next. It all has to be like a show. And so we have to work very hard on this. We're about to do something no one's ever done before, but we got to get it to a point where a variety of people say, hey, I can support that. I can give you something to do that for, do that with. I want to sponsor this and start paying for things and everything else. But we're doing it better than most other people. But a lot of the other coverage isn't better content, but it is cleaner. And we have to clean that up. So we have to look at how to experiment, but we also have to look at how to, we really have to box this in. We've been experimenting with all of these bits and pieces. We have to box it into a clean show. Like it is, when I say clean show, not the clean show that we normally have here, but literally like a seamless show that goes through that. And that's totally doable. At this point where, again, I think we're probably 3 shows away. I think we had to do two or three more shows. The 3rd or 4th show from there is something that we can probably get people to support us doing, and I think that then that starts to change the math of everything that's going on. So I think that that's the trajectory, but but we have to look at all those little things. We can't invent anything. And we've become a huge, can't invent weird things that people, this gets into the thing that I'm good at is doing things crazy, but we can't have anything that looks odd to people when they're going through it. It has to just look good, and we have to kind of tighten that all up. And so I think that we need to do 2 or 3 more, and then we'll be at a point where we understand this enough that we can pull it off. And then at that point, I think we'll be doing a lot of them. Next question.
Greg Greckmeyer from Topping, Virginia. I really like the behind the coverage snippets included in the broadcast while the crew is moving from booth to booth. What are the pros and cons of including this live footage?
Go ahead, Josh.
Well, I think the biggest pro is that what we're trying to do, I kind of think of these coverage of our events as being a nexus of taking our audience and putting them in the field with our community. And so it really does that. It really gives the feeling that you're there, that you have access, that you can grab a hold of the rudder by your Mukana questions and have them actually, what was that thing that actually happened during them? Con might be once you start mobile with a mobile reception, that can be on, it could cut out. So you might have to just really ride that video fader.
Yeah, go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, I totally agree with Josh. One of the big drawbacks is just dropout and then being faced with a big black box in your super source. I think we did this a bit better just on the back end team with NAM than we did with CineGear. We did have the opportunity to go to it a little bit more in CineGear, but we just didn't quite gel. It took a long time, I think, with this show to get the team into a rhythm at the beginning, the first hour, second hour. Actually, it took a wee while for us to settle into a good cutting rhythm. But massive job by Brian and Gudrun and Taylor and the team in general that were part of that. The ability to connect with the audience, that this is live on the show floor, I think is fantastic within just seeing that kind of journey. But I quite like what we did at the end of the show, which is that kind of walk and talk, as I mentioned earlier. I think that kind of engages even to a higher level. Again, as long as you got the connection.
Go ahead, Bill.
Just plus one with what everybody said. That you are there feeling. The first time I saw that, I think it was a little bit at NAB, which didn't really go out on the air, but certainly at NAM, the traveling shots made me feel like I was at the trade show, and I think that's really hard to do and valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Roscoe.
Yeah, it takes someone like Guy, though, to really pull that together, to be going by booths and, explain what they are. I worry that a splintering would take place if we don't have that pre-planned route.
Go ahead, Noah.
It definitely opened up the show so that we could see, more of what was going on and get more of the experience of the boots on the ground. And there were two things that happened there. The tank actually moved right with Guy, and so that was part of it. Or even when we were walking, we basically just put it on the widest shot, and that roving tank worked for some behind the scenes. But then we also had a secondary phone, which was my personal iPhone, that we used for like BTS. Now we favored that more for NAMM than we did for CineGear, primarily because Roscoe was running the main rig more than I was at certain times, and then essentially we switched spots for CineGear. And the reality was I was getting fatigued, so I kind of gave up on that secondary phone because I was like, I have too many things to focus on. Let's, pull our elbows in and focus on what's important, which was the main rig. Plus, we're moving faster. So at the end of the day, if we have an extra set of steady hands, that can be just a normal thing that we have in our programming.
Go ahead, Carl.
There was a bit of two minds on this one, as far as I'm concerned. I felt like during the NAMM, when we were following them, it was quite good. With CineGear, it was kind of interesting because we'd actually get to the booth and we'd see Guy prepping the person ready to talk, and they would actually go off and program. And it's kind of like seeing the sausage made as far as getting a show tighter. I don't know if that works, but I think the traveling works. But once you get to the booth, you want to turn off the behind the scenes and let Guy do his thing with the person he's speaking to. The 2-up was quite good. So having the panel beside the commute was good, but I don't know if putting up the sausage being made at the booth, getting the person, in ears and that kind of thing. I don't know if that's good for a tight show as far as what we're looking for.
Yeah, it's a little dangerous. I really enjoyed the Fujinon one where he's figuring stuff out. But I was like, I hope he doesn't say anything. Like he was I don't think he was conscious that he was on air. And so he was figuring stuff out in real time, and he did great. And it was one of my favorite parts. This is the thing, to Carl, is one of my favorite parts of the show was watching him figure out how he was going to set that up. And I thought it was really fun to watch. And especially and this gets into also where we may have another, I think there could be another stream, bandwidth permitting, that is a big, super wide shot that comes off the tank that is in another room, like in Zoom. So we have in another room in Zoom, you're just watching the production. You're hearing all the audio. It's just one big wide shot. And people are sitting there talking about the production and watching it and everything else, because that's what we do, right? Like we do transparent productions. And so that would be a lot of fun to see the whole crew kind of doing its thing in that part. But I do think, I had one where I brought a live view this is an NAB, into a Red party. Red had this huge party, and they had all the, it was like one of their biggest parties. And I had it in there. I'm roaming around, showing everything to it. And then someone came up and said, you got to stop recording. I'm like, sure. And I said, I don't have a tape. I don't have, and they said, what's happening? I was like, well, I'm streaming it live. And they were like, what's the delay? And I was like, 20 seconds. There was like this blank look on their faces. They went white in front of thousands of people because it was a lot of people were watching the stream. And so that's the kind of thing I'd like to avoid. It's not a great way to make new friends. But I think I felt like some of the gold that we saw there was from that Fujinon one was really amazing. Next question.
Chris Widener from Lafayette, Indiana. The tank approach was very cool. What are some of the particulars of construction? What are some of the things you're thinking about for the next iteration?
Go ahead, Noah.
So the core of the unit was a stand with wheels that fold up. I wish I had pictures. I'll have to bring them next time. So it's a collapsible stand. It's about $150 on Amazon. And then we have what's called a baby double header for the first iteration. The second iteration was a triple header. And so that's basically baby pins that are in up and down orientations. And then for the triple header, I had an extra one in the middle. The cool thing about having that extra pin in the middle is we were able to put a 20-inch C-stand arm on it, and then I created another platform out of the B-bond plastic material that I used for shelves. And in that, I cut holes for the antennas. So we basically got the masts of the antennas up higher. Thank you for adding those graphics. And for Cine Gear, we had that mast which allowed us to get better cell reception in that space. And then at the bottom, I actually added a plank from the B-bond material as well to hold batteries. And we had hooks with super grip clamps to hold backpacks. And so, yeah, basically it was weighted at the bottom so it didn't tip over. Some iterations for the next one. If we're not going to spend a ton of money, the first thing I would do is upgrade the wheels because those like 3-inch wheels were okay. But having, 5-inch wheels or so would be helpful. But I would really love to just build that from the ground up. And so, like I said, Guy and I are going to connect and talk about a few things because we might have something that's, way better than what we had.
I get those powered wheels off that cart that guy showed.
Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I thought maybe you ought to move to something like a sound cart. And you can look around and find these on True Audio, excuse me, and find a used one. You find a guy that's, retiring and going to retire his sound cart because they have the larger wheels in the back and the casters in the front. And it allows you a lot of mobility in a small package. Plus, it's very sturdy. You can put some 12-volt lead-acid batteries in the bottom to power everything. You can use the two verticals. You can mount camera masts on the top of those and a monitor or something looking forward. I think it would be very handy to use something like that. But look around. I'm sure a lot of them are available for use for people that are getting out of the industry. A lot of sound guys have these things sitting around the garage they just want to get rid of.
Yeah, and I think that the sound cart approach, I think, is a great one in the iteration. I think at some point we're going to build one, but I think that lets us experiment with stuff pretty quickly, and it's nice because you can fold it up, from that perspective as well. So that's a good thing to think about there. Next question.
Jonas Donnell from Stuttgart. What's next for producing these types of coverages?
Go ahead, Noah.
Yeah, so one of the things that marks a successful event in my eyes was the fact that Paul and Mike Sweeney and other folks reached out to me and said, hey, let's do this next event. Can we cover this? Can we cover that? So that's exciting that people are like, we did so well that we want to do more. So that's great. At the same time, after Cyber Rodeo, NAMM, and these projects, we all just need a little bit of recovery time. And I think that to clear our mind and to give us all a break and to catch our breath, that's a needed thing. And then we could readdress what's next. So as far as the coverage goes, we did mention a few things earlier in the show, right? Some of the things that we might cover. So let's ping Alex and figure out that form, see what the amount of response is, like how many people want to volunteer, and then we can address which projects we want to take on next.
Yeah, and again, I don't think that they all have to fall on the same team either. There's plenty of us, that are doing stuff. So we want to, if you're interested in producing these things, we don't want to put too much pressure on any one person or any group of people. So we want to keep on thinking about how we can, run with these. And again, some of the ones will be smaller, some of them will be bigger experiments. I think Oshkosh is a big experiment for us because we just really don't know much about it. I think that the SIGGRAPH, I think, is a really good opportunity. There's a lot of eye candy. I think I can get some subject experts to be part of that conversation. And between Nick and I think we can we have a lot of air cover, for that one. The knob conference, knob world or whatever, looks really fun, and it looks like a smaller one that we can experiment with. So I think that I'm pretty interested in that one. If people in Chicago are interested in that, and then obviously the big one that a lot of us are looking at is there's IBC, and Richard has said that he's got a live view. That's according to Richard, and we've got a couple people, other people reach out too. So I think that we're moving towards having enough people to do a ground crew. I think IBC is completely different than NAB in a lot of different ways, and I think it'd be really valuable. And it's actually a conference that I know really well. So I went to NAB 25 times. I've been to IBC maybe 10. So I kind of know both of those platforms pretty well. I think IBC would be interesting to do for us because it would really have a European flavor, like we'd have a European team. And so I think that one's worth it. And then the big one for us is AES and NAB in the fall. I think that's the one that I'm focused on a lot as far as like going much heavier than we have in the past, depending on what we can get as far as support goes. But and it's mostly because I just don't want to put too much pressure on the IBC folks. So we have, if we have a large enough crew, we go heavier there too. So it's just a matter of what we do there. But those ones, and then I think that's our year. So I don't think there's anything after that. So I think those are the ones that I'm tracking a lot. And then in the next year, we'll start thinking about those ones as well. Next question.
Nathan GS in Singapore. How was performance of the wireless mics during the show coverage? Maybe next time, twin mics?
And I have a pretty hard out, so we'll keep this pretty quick. Go ahead, Noah.
Yeah, I thought it worked pretty well. Thank you, Bill Davis, again for sending us those. So we used the Sennheisers. There were 2 sets of them. We only really needed one. And I think, we had very minor dropouts. We had one battery swap towards the end of Cine Gear, and that was like after 6 hours of being live with that battery.
Go ahead, Bill.
I was actually surprised it worked as well as it did. I told Noah that it worked for this, but actually that system, the AVX system, has a different handheld microphone transmitter that is balanced to that system. When you use it with the little 3.5 millimeter to XLR connector, it really doesn't have the sensitivity that most of it does, and I've not used that too much with dynamic mics for that reason. But I'm surprised. We could hear everything pretty well, and it outperformed my expectation for a modestly priced system like that.
Go ahead, Roscoe.
It was great to have a local receiver so I could hear directly from the mic in my own ear, also well on the field crew. And thank you to Mickey, who also put it into the program feed. That was wonderful, or whoever took care of that. I think it was Mickey.
That's great. Well, it is good that we started early. We're now at the end of the second hour, and with an extra 20 minutes in there. We didn't get to all the questions. I apologize to everybody. I tried at the end to kind of spread it out to make sure we covered as many people that hadn't asked questions in there. So we tried to kind of take care of everybody as best we could. But thanks so much. Thanks to our producers for all the great questions and keeping this thing going. Thanks to the panelists. We can't do this without you. And amazing work to everyone who put this together. And I think it's the beginning of something pretty cool. And thank you, to all the people on the back end, both for these shows as well as for this show to make it all happen. All right. Remember tomorrow that we have Nick Justin coming in. He's going to talk about going from mesh to MetaHuman, which is pretty cool. There's a link in the thing that we sent out in the emails where you can actually see him do it with his own head, and he's going to talk about how to actually make that happen and answer your questions tomorrow. So stay tuned for that. All right, let's jump into After Hours. It's so dark. It's like DC dark. Happy trails to you until we meet again. Usually when I don't have anything to say, all I just say is Mitchell Rose.
I'm your father.
It's the sled. It's his sled. I ruined the movie for you.